You're tuned into 9 to 5 Work Rebels with your host, Evadney Girl.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gems in Comms podcast series special, brought to you by 9 to 5 Work Rebels in association with Hanson Search, the award-winning international executive search consultancy. I am Evadney Gale, your host for today, and I am very excited to be introducing Evadney Campbell MBE. She's a university lecturer and co-founder of Shiloh PR. Welcome, Evadney.
Thank you.
No problem. I'm very happy to have you here. So just so you get an idea, the idea of this podcast is a series special that I'm doing for my 9 to 5 Work Rebels podcast. And literally it is about us, myself and Hanson Search as well, giving the people of colour within our industry their flowers. Okay, it's giving you guys your flowers because I feel like we hear lots of stories about the industry being 92% or 91% white. There are lots of drives to do with the initiatives and DEI, lots going on there. But I think it's really important that we hear from the voices who are in the industry and have been in the industry for a good amount of time, doing some great work, but not always recognised. So, you know, these are our gems, and you're a gem that we're giving flowers to, absolutely. Okay. So again, thank you for joining me. And let's start off with a bit of a background into, you know, who you are. So tell us about yourself and what you do.
About what I do now, I think this is probably, I say it's my third career, really.
Okay.
But yeah, because I started at, I'd say 3, but most people would say it's 2. But I still think what I did in terms of the voluntary work that I've done for a number of years, which led to the MBE, I still see that as one career. Okay. But actually now I run Shiloh PR with my daughter. That's my primary role. Right. And then I lecture, as you said in your introduction, at 2 different universities. I lecture at the University of Bedfordshire, which is based in Luton. And I am responsible for their radio production training. And that's for like the second year of the journalist students. Right. In London, I do radio, but with PR for their masters students who are doing public relations as their masters. So I do PR in radio, really. But on a day-to-day basis, you will find me glued to the computer most of the time, trying to either responding to emails for current clients or pitching to other people. So you're working on all these pitches, and then they either come to fruition or they don't. But you spend an awful lot of time putting together proposals, which don't always materialize. So,
the nature of the game, isn't it?
Just everyday things to do with PR and learning, because you know, Ebony, that this industry changes constantly.
Absolutely.
You know, when I started out doing public relations, I focused a lot on traditional media relations type things. But as time has progressed, so much more is reliant on digital PR.
Absolutely.
That's what a lot of your clients are asking for. So actually, I'm always having to try my best to keep on top of what's happening in this industry so that we can be relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How long have you been in the industry?
Well, in terms of public relations, we launched officially Shiloh PR in 2013. And that's when I gave up my journalism full-time job, because I was a broadcast journalist with BBC, and I worked at a number of BBC stations, but I left in 2012, the end of December 2012, I left, and then launched formally Shiloh PR in June 2013. And before I did that, I went and did a course on a training course to be able to do adult training. So I could be qualified to become an adult trainer, hence the lecturing side of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I suppose we've been doing the public relations formally since 2013. Right. But in reality, because of my role with the BBC, I was doing public relations, but traditional media relations for a number of people that I knew, contacts that would come to me and say, you know, because they knew I used to have my own radio show for BBC. So they'd come and say, can you help us with getting the media to cover things that they're doing? So I've been doing that since 2004, really.
Oh, amazing. So you've had a long career within that. And then when you were doing your own show, what was your own show about? That's quite exciting.
I used to have a magazine radio show for BBC that played music, 99.9% reggae music of all types within that broad-based genre, and then interviews. So it's a combination of anything that I felt would be of interest to the African and Caribbean communities. And initially I started at BBC Radio Gloucestershire. Mm-hmm. So we covered for Gloucestershire. And after, I think it was about 3 years or so, I started doing the Southwest regions. Right. So I would be doing a program on BBC Bristol, Wiltshire, and Gloucestershire, but similar type. So I would just go and cover any local activities that the community were holding that I thought, you know,
would be relevant to the,
Yeah. It was, do you know what? I used to do lots and lots of voluntary work within the Black community.
Yeah.
So when I was asked by the BBC to do this program, to do this radio show, I actually saw it as an opportunity to give a voice or a broader voice to the community using the media.
Yeah.
Because obviously I was campaigning a lot in terms of what I saw. And I say that, I say that quite clearly these days, because obviously we were young and what we saw as being unfair and unequal, and therefore we're out there campaigning for the rights of Black people.
Yeah.
So therefore, I just thought, you know what? This is a chance for me to air some of those views. They could come and talk about it on a mainstream media. It's a BBC media platform.
Yeah.
So they could use that opportunity. And that's how I initially very much more about an extension of what I was doing.
And it sounds like it was very organic as well, the way it kind of morphed into that. So that's cool. Oh, that sounds brilliant. So you've had a very interesting, I like that you came from the reggae background, music. So my heritage, you know, my family are from Jamaica, so love reggae music. Okay. So that must have been quite fun for you as well. Must be quite fun as well to kind of put that on the platform.
Loved every minute of it because, and also the beauty for me, and it wouldn't be the same now, I know, for most of those who are presenting radio shows. The BBC, this was in the mid 80s, so 87 is when I started on BBC Radio Gloucestershire. The BBC knew that it was launching a brand new radio station to cover Gloucestershire.
Right.
It also recognized that it needed to have specialist programs. And therefore, it was a tick box exercise for them.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. You know, whatever they might want to say now, it was a tick box exercise.
Absolutely.
I was just fortunate that actually I thought I could use it.
You could use it.
So that
you did. You leveraged it. Yeah.
Exactly. And that was the point. But the other thing, what I was saying about the music, they knew nothing about the music. So they didn't sanction, they couldn't monitor because they had no idea. They didn't know what I was playing.
Yeah.
So I was playing whatever I fancied.
Yeah.
They had
I like that concept. That must be so funny. Especially with some of the music. Honestly, once they realise now, it'd be like, oh, is that what they were saying?
There were times, even I listened to something, I think, oh my goodness, you managed to get away with playing that on air.
That's so funny. I can only imagine.
They had no idea. They didn't know what I was playing.
Yeah, they just thought, oh, it checks the box.
So I just played what I wanted to play. So that was fine. It wouldn't happen now, as I say, because I get asked all the time, how did you get into radio? And I said, I can tell you how I got into it, but it's not going to help you because it wouldn't happen now.
Yeah,
I was just very, very fortunate in those days.
Yeah.
But so there were that side of it where I knew that they allowed me the freedom, A, to cover the stories that I felt were of interest to the community, and B, to play the music that I enjoyed.
Right.
So I remember I used to get, I letters from all of the prisons around the area. And me being me and being quite naive, and I'm thinking, oh, you know, these letters are coming from them and they asking for you to do to say hi to their families and to play certain music. And I just did. And then I got called in and told that, you know, I'm not supposed to be going through letters from prisoners.
Well, they're genuine listeners, even though they were, you know, behind bars.
Oh, yeah, they were genuine, but because they were behind bars, they just said you shouldn't be doing that. I just,
yeah, you're just going with the motions.
But I just felt, you know what, and I still am a passionate person in rehabilitation. I still feel very passionately about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially where it comes to our young Black men who are disproportionately represented in the prison system.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I felt that I really was just a conduit. The number of marriage proposals that I did on behalf of prisoners was just,
wow.
I don't even know. I don't know how many of them ever became actually married. But
wow. That's amazing though. You got some interesting stories, I'm telling you.
Constant marriage proposals. So, and some of them became real regulars that you knew their partners' names and their names. And, you know, it was.
That's nice though.
So, yeah.
It sounds like a nice stage in your career. Yeah, it sounds like a nice stage. Yeah. So what attracted you to moving into sort of the PR industry then? Because I suppose you was already doing bits anyway, weren't you? So you really had your toe dipping.
Yeah, I think on the
other side.
Absolutely. And also what happened, the reason why I then decided to do it full time was that I had been doing it. So I kind of had a concept, and now I'm learning constantly. So I realized I had a concept of what it entailed as opposed to really what I've now realized it entailed. Right. But I'd got to the point where I'd been working for the BBC. I'd moved from Bristol to London in 2001. I'd done a lot of things within the BBC, but thankfully I worked across television. I've worked online, and I did radio, and I decided to leave because I had just been approached to work in the Caribbean as the BBC reporter for the Caribbean. And I'd gone through all the training that you have to go through ahead of being posted abroad. And then BBC decided, as part of its reorganization, as per usual, they got rid of the Caribbean service.
Oh, wow.
And so, which meant that I then had to go back to work at BBC London from the office. And it had been a long time since I'd worked in the office as a reporter, doing day news and so on.
Yeah, of course.
And I just thought, to be honest, I thought, this is not for me. I actually like people. That's the basis of what I am, is I like people. And I was very fortunate that for the previous 6 years of working for the BBC, I was based in the Black community in Brixton to start off with, and then in Croydon, and then of course with this work preparation for the Caribbean. So I realized that my passion was with
the community,
continually working within the Black community.
Yes.
And I just thought, if I don't leave the BBC now, there was a process of where they were looking for people who wanted to take redundancies. So I just thought this is a good chance now for me to A, get redundancy, but B, to do the PR that I wanted to do, because then because for Shiloh PR, we set up specifically to represent and to promote and to give access to the African and Caribbean communities. That's our niche. I don't try to be all things to all men. If a client comes to me and they want to reach the Black community, that's my area of expertise. I'm not just a PR company that wants to, what is your target? If your target isn't that community, then we're not the right PR company for you.
Right. Yeah.
So I've just felt that this is my chance to do this before it was too late. And that's why I left the BBC, and then, as I said, did the training, because I knew the PR on its own would not likely to bring me enough income, certainly not initially. And I knew I would need to do some training as part. And I decided I wanted to do training as a supplement to what I was doing, and then launched the company formally, and here we are.
Amazing. Well, that's great.
Years later.
Yeah, that's very brilliant. So a question I like to ask everybody is about, okay, your lived experiences. And this touches on just before you get in the industry. So one of the things I ask all my guests are, when did you first become aware of your ethnicity? Now, this might be a strange question for listeners, but for us people of color, it is not a strange question, believe me. Okay.
Not at all. Not at all. And you know what? I love that question because, and I've had similar before, and it's made me realize there's two pieces to this. I was born in Jamaica. Right. So I spent the first 10 years of my life in Jamaica. And I came to the UK, went to secondary school immediately. And I was very fortunate that the secondary school I went to was really mixed school.
Right.
Lots. So I didn't feel out of place there.
Yeah.
There was not any of that. When I first became aware of being a Black person was when I started working.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes, for some people, this is like, what do you mean you've always been Black? Yeah, but that's when I was consciously made to feel
exactly
my Blackness was different.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yes,
you accept who you are, but it doesn't, nobody's slapping you in your face with it and making you realize that you're actually being treated differently as a result of the color of your skin. So that only happened when I started working.
Okay.
So I suppose if I'm going to talk about when did I become consciously aware of my ethnicity, I would say that was at work. And I tell you what happened. First of all, I'd gone for this job at this company, which was one of those, it was new into Gloucester. I was living in Gloucester at the time, but it was posh. The office was amazing. It was all fancy. And I remember when I was going for the interview, everybody in the city kept saying to me, you're not going to get it because they don't have Black people at that place. They don't employ no Black people, so you're not going to get it. But anyway, I got the job. When I turned up for the job, it was, oh, well, that particular job that we offered you, no. And this was only in the typing pool. Let's be honest. It wasn't like some grand job.
Yeah,
I was trained. I'd done shorthand, done typing, got all my qualifications. So, but no, there isn't any position there. So we're going to put you in the reprographics department. Printing. Yeah. I was young.
That's not what you
went for. My first proper job.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you're thinking to yourself, well, that's not what I was offered. But anyway, it's this company. There was only one other Black person worked there, and I knew her. So there was just the two of us as Black people. So I took the job, and the people were lovely. The people in that department were lovely. I made some great friends. So it wasn't like it was never going to be me.
Yeah.
That was not going to be what I wanted. So I carried on at night school doing my shorthand training and everything. And I kept applying for jobs in the typing pool where you don't need shorthand, but I kept doing it. And eventually, through all sorts, I got the job in the typing pool. Then I started looking to become a secretary. That was really getting difficult. And it was somebody who I worked with who was part of the unions, because by then I was also doing lots of community work. So I was working with lots of voluntary sector stuff in the community. And he said to me, Evadney, I think they're discriminating against you. Now, can you believe I didn't see that?
You didn't see that yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
It took somebody else.
And it's a white person.
Yeah.
White person that said to me, they're doing it because you're Black. That's why you're not getting the jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I was you, he suggested that I should take them to court. And I was like, well, I can't do that. You know what I mean? A Black person is just so small. I don't take this big old company
to court.
Yeah,
you're thinking little old me. Like,
how do I prove? How do I?
Yeah, absolutely.
But how do I prove that it was really down to the fact that I was Black? You know what I mean? And this is the problem: is that it's such a difficult thing to prove. And this is why I keep saying to people, when people ask you for examples, give me an example of what you're like, unless you can feel what I feel, you can't tell me whether I'm being discriminated
Exactly. And it's very difficult because this is what the conversation we had earlier with the person I interviewed earlier was about, the fact that the UK, you know, they are very introverted with their racism. It's very covert racism. And a lot of it is microaggressions, little subtle, ignorant comments that are made. It's not your blatant, you know, like in America where it's, you know, screaming in your face, the N-word or whatever else. I hear it's much more cleverly done and much more underhanded with the way that it's done. You know, so I think that's interesting. So I was going to say, you know, have you felt like your race ethnicity has held you back in your career? So I suppose it held you back in your typing career, as we just heard, you know.
It did hold me back through that career. It took a lot longer. I did back. And I think part of my strength is I don't give up.
Yeah.
I don't ever give up. And it's a good job I have that tenacity because I've battled. And by the time I'd left that company, not only had I become a PA to our chair, I was the chairman's assistant PA. I was PA to one of our executive directors on the board. I left after I was heading up our international training organizing group. I don't give up. I never give up.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
So I just kind of thought, okay, well, I can't change the fact that I'm Black. You know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I accept that, and I see this happening more and more and more. We have to have that piece of paper that keeps giving us the reassurance that we're good enough. And sometimes I'm saying to people now, stop it. We don't need to keep going through that next qualification, just to prove to these people that we're good enough.
Yeah.
We shouldn't. And now I'm older.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I said, I agree. We shouldn't have to do that, but we always feel obligated to do that or to work twice as hard because we know that ultimately we're going against others who are not working as hard as we are. But unfortunately, we have to deal with their prejudices and the stereotypes that, you know, they place on us. You know, we turn up ready for work. We're here, we're good to go, but we face, you know, your prejudices, the people on the other side who may feel like, oh, well, that person's Black, so they're lazy or they don't work hard or, you know, whatever stereotype they choose to put on us. So I completely get that. And I think it's important what you said, which is about pushing forward and keeping moving. So you have kind of experienced it in the workplace. You've witnessed racism in the workplace, however subtle, I'm sure. Have you witnessed it in the workplace, say, for example, at the BBC? Or did you not as much?
I think, yes, to a degree. Again, everything is very subtle.
Yeah.
So it's always very difficult, you know, because if I said that I loved the BBC, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
and I'm very, very critical of the BBC. And I'm very critical of the BBC and how it works with Black people and some other ethnic groups.
Right.
And I think until you leave the BBC, that's when you finally are consciously aware of the fact that you were held back.
Right.
You know, it's since I've left the BBC, I have understood a lot more of my true worth and my value.
Right.
Because whilst I was at the BBC, I think over a period of time, you're left feeling, when you keep going for promotion, for instance, or you see the better jobs going to somebody who's younger and who doesn't look like you, you start thinking something is amiss here.
With you. Oh,
but then what starts happening is you internalize that feeling and start feeling that maybe I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Maybe I should be doing. So you start blaming yourself because you're thinking, well, it's got to be me, as opposed to the fact that there are institutional things going on here that you can't change.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but when I left the BBC and I started doing workshops or speaking, I used to do a lot more speaking engagements. And when they introduce you and they say, oh, she's worked for the BBC, with the BBC for nearly 30 years, and you see people's face change and light up, you realize that the BBC has a lot of kudos, But when you're there as a Black person, you don't feel it. You feel undervalued.
Yeah. No,
so when I come out, I've been able to, I've used it, not in any negative, but I've used it because I say that's part of the experience that's put me where I am today.
It's not a lie, it's truth. It's the truth. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and the BBC does amazing training. So if you're willing to train and the reputation that it has worldwide helps you.
Absolutely.
So yes, I think the BBC has a long way to go in terms of how it values its Black staff.
Good.
You can attract them, and I'm sure your listeners will have been aware recently that a number of senior Black staff have left the BBC, and most have complained. But it's about the fact that BBC doesn't have a great retention history for Black staff. And so in a sense, I can say from that point of view, yes.
Yes.
And even in public relations now, that it's rife. I'm sorry.
It's absolutely rife.
I can't even sugarcoat it.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. It is a huge, the industry is like 91% white. So it's not, they talk a lot about trying to change the industry. And I feel like there are people trying to change. There's pockets of people, but there's a lot of checkbox ticking going on in this big industry. So I think it's interesting that you said that, and particularly about the BBC, because I've heard stories like that as well of seniors that have left, feeling like they were, kept at a certain level, not able to kind of flourish and really spread their wings and really, make some headway to a degree. So it depended on who you're working with in the department. So yeah, I completely understand that. So when you did experience any sort of workplace racism or witness it, do you think it was ever handled well? Like, do you have any instances where they were handled well, or is it mostly like it wasn't handled at all, or maybe it wasn't always brought to attention?
I think it would be difficult to even say because I've never formally complained of discrimination.
Right.
So in fairness, no one within my workplace would say that, oh, well, Evadney told us that she was being discriminated against, we did this or we did that. Because Evadney never formally made any complaints.
Right.
With my first job, when I was told categorically that was possibly one of the things, what I did then, and it's actually changed the trajectory of my life, I think, to a degree, is I then went to what was then called the Race Equality Council. And I was speaking to one of their staff there about what I thought was happening to me at work. And as after that, all of, what happened, what transpired from that was I then started working with the Race Equality Council. I started going to local employers and to talk about what are they doing to deal with equality within their workplace. And one of the things I was instrumental in, or as part of, was the campaign in the 80s, 90s to get ethnic monitoring done by companies.
Amazing.
Because at that time, everybody kept saying, well, the Black people aren't applying, or we don't have any records. So that's when we fought for them to have ethnic monitoring. I know it's now got to the point where a lot of people won't complete the form, but I still say to them, the reason why those forms were introduced is so that the people who are fighting for equality had facts and figures
to back
up their argument.
To back it up. Absolutely. And I think that's important.
Absolutely. And what was happening was that, as we know, and it still does now, that's why I said people keep saying to you, day one, oh, well, give me examples of when you were discriminated against. Give me this, show me, stop it.
Absolutely.
It doesn't, that's not how it works.
Exactly. They expect you to come and say, oh, this person called me an N-word. That's not how it works. If you're in a workplace, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be subtleties, things, microaggressions, and they don't always understand the nuances of that. Not everyone's experience is going to be the same. It's going to be very different depending on who you come into contact with. So really interesting. But that's great work, what you did with the ethnic monitoring. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's very key. It's very important. I know some people don't like to do it and they don't like to be pigeonholed and things like that, but I feel like it's very important. Otherwise, you won't get to a full handle on what it is. People can, you can say what you like, but numbers don't lie. So,
I think that's the thing, but it's about education, because if we don't educate people as to why those forms, we know they can be used for good. And the point is they were there so that those people had facts and figures. If a company said, well, we advertised this job, you can now go and say, well, how many people from an ethnic minority background did you have apply? How many did you interview? Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And who got the job? But at least we had those figures to argue with. Yeah. Whereas before you didn't. You only had them saying, yeah, well, I don't know. They're just not applying for jobs.
Yeah, and you're just like, excuses. And you just think, this isn't quite it.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah. But now we have those facts and figures. But again, it's, as I said, we were campaigning in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. By now, 2022, these young people who are asked to fill out this form don't know why. Yeah, and they think it could be used against them. So that's why they're anti it. It's because we're not educating them why it's important to have these documents.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I agree with that as well. And that kind of you kind of covered it already, because my next question was more about when you ever spoken up about something around that. And you did, because you went and got this ethnic minority monitoring going. So that's brilliant. And it's, you were essentially self-advocating, but also for others as well. So I think that's brilliant. Now, another thing I want to pick up on is code switching. Now, I think this is something that we do. And I think everyone does it to a degree, right? We all do it to a degree. So absolutely. I feel like, do you think there's ever a time where we can kind of lead with our authentic voices in the workplace, or will we forever be code switching? Because I feel like we do this a lot. Yeah. And we've had to, because of stereotypes placed upon us and things like that as well.
Absolutely. Do you know what? I really wish I could say that there's going to be a time when we can just be ourselves and we can bring our authentic self to work. But as long as we are in this society, whether it be in Britain, in America, in whatever, we will always we do code switch. Yeah. I know that for a fact. Yeah. And I do it probably less now, purely because my client base are Black. So I can be myself.
Be your more self. Yeah, absolutely.
But I also know that when I go networking or when I go to meetings, I have to.
I do it all the time. Yeah. I find that I do my own. You have to. Again, like when I was working in-house at companies, I was always code switching. I work for myself independently with my own clients. I don't do it as much, but I still find that I still code switch. Particularly go for networking, whatever. You have to. Unfortunately, you feel like you have to. I feel like it's, and like you said, it's the structure. We are living in a white supremacy structure, essentially. So we have to sort of flip it and switch it when we need to. Yeah.
We don't have a choice.
We don't really have a choice.
The funny thing is, it's amazing, and I know you'll see, is these things didn't have a name before. No. We just did it.
We didn't think. Yeah, I know.
It was life. It was how we understood as a Black person it needed to be.
It needed to be done, exactly.
And so we didn't think about it. It was just how we go to work. I remember when I was doing the radio show, and I also used to DJ a lot. And my specialty was bashment, so you can just imagine.
I can imagine, yes.
And I would go to certain dances, and that time I was quite senior in my full-time job. Right. And my friend, she was also senior working for the local authority, one of my best friends. So we all had good jobs. And then we'd often just say to ourselves in the middle of a dance, oh my God, if anybody from work could see us now.
I feel like we all do this. We all do this. It's so true. It is so true. And I feel like a lot of us do this. And it's a natural thing that we've had to kind of teach ourselves to do. And like you said, when we're out with my friends, I'm a bit more relaxed, a bit more chilled. But again, if your white people saw you, it'd be like, is that the same? Is that Evadney? No way. Because it's completely different hats, isn't it? We put on our different hats, and we have to. I think it's interesting though. But yeah, I kind of agree with you. I don't always feel like, whilst people say, join this organization, be your authentic self, I don't think that's really true always at all. No. Not for people of color, essentially, because we have so many stereotypes and prejudices that we place upon us that we already, have to put up a few layers to kind of even operate, don't we? Interesting.
Yeah, you have to.
Interesting. And then I suppose my next question would be about PR and comms. You mentioned it a bit earlier, but when did you become aware of the colour bias within the PR and comms industry? Because obviously you came from BBC, you're probably, was you like, all bushy-tailed and ready to jump into PR, and then you think, oh, it's a bit different.
Do you know what? I didn't know a great deal about the kind of official formal PR and processes, and because years ago, PR was about people who had money and wanted to find a job, but they didn't really have to go and do a 9 to 5. So they said, I'm a PR or a publicist, and they had their best friends, so they represented their best friends, and so they were fine. Now, when I was working for the BBC, particularly when I was working in both Brixton and in Croydon, I recognized that a lot of the community groups, the Black-run, Black-led community groups and individuals doing amazing things weren't getting access to the media. That was the key for me. Right. And they would complain, because when they saw me in meetings and found out that I was there as a BBC reporter, they'd run and come and they'd start telling me things. But they wouldn't tell the mainstream media because they thought the mainstream media isn't interested in covering what we're doing. And I kept saying, after I started looking, I said, sometimes it's not that they're not interested. Sometimes they are interested. It's how you present it to them. You don't understand what the mainstream media wants from you.
What they're looking for, yeah.
And so a lot of my time out of work, I would often quietly be calling them to tip them off how they should do something.
Yeah.
Or I'd say, you need to create a press release. I'll help you.
Yeah.
And then I realized that. So for me, in terms of that, but in terms of recognizing biases and racism within the sector, it's only now that I run my own that I've seen that.
Right.
I've really realized that you or I, some of the client groups that you see others getting that you can't get yet, even though they don't have a fraction of the experience that you've got.
Yeah.
But they're landing clients with these huge contracts that you don't have hope
you can't even to get to it. Exactly.
And a lot of it is done through same as ever. And in this country, class is everything. And connections is everything. Yep. It's exactly the same in the PR industry. If you don't have the right connections, you're not getting
You're not going to get those sort of clients to you. Absolutely. I agree with that too. I agree. No. And it's a major issue in this industry.
It is a huge issue.
And I feel like they talk a lot about it, but they don't do enough about it.
Yes, absolutely. And for me, because we set up Shiloh PR to say, we will help you reach this target. The minute I mention the word African and Caribbean, all they hear in their head is, you're a Black company.
Yeah. And that's all they can see, unfortunately.
And that's all they see.
It's not good enough, but it's interesting. So you've really became aware of it when you came into the industry. So I think that's interesting because obviously I was in the industry for a while.
The extent of how bad it is.
Once you're in it that way. No, I can understand that. It's interesting though. Unfortunate.
It's a shame though, because we are still being judged by the color of our skin. When I go to pitch to a client, especially a corporate client, white organization, I know it's hard for them to see past my color. Even if what I'm saying
makes a whole
resonates.
Lot of sense.
It's the fact is, in their head, could I, as a Black woman, represent them? And it's just, it frustrates me no end. And that's what there's so many times like, nope, this is what my niche is. If it means that I'm not going to make any, I'm not going to be rich out of this. This is not, but I will plod on because that's what I believe in. I'm not interested in, and if you don't want to you say you want to reach the Black community, yet you want to use your people to reach us. How are you going to do that?
How are you going to do that? Exactly. Without using the right ones. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And everybody thinks they're an expert in different things now. They might get one person and feel like, oh, well, we launched this campaign, so then we got that. But yeah, I get it. And I feel like there could be more that could be done. I feel like for me, the colour bias in the industry became more more imprinted in my mind once I definitely went independent, but also with all the networking as well. So even sitting on the Women in PR committee, for example, which really good to do, but absolutely was just very stark reminder of how white the industry is. And it was really interesting because myself and Sarah Sammy were the two women of colour, the first ever women of colour to be put on the board. So we were happy to be doing that, but it was also challenging as well. You can see the connections and how everybody kind of, will intermingle, and then you realise, oh, that person's got that client, and oh, well, that one was connected to that person, and you start to see the kind of, how they kind of help each other out. So I think it's interesting. Yeah. So as I'm talking about that, what are your thoughts on allyship, and what does it kind of mean for you?
Well, allyship?
Yeah, allyship.
Do you know, I'm going to be honest here. From my perspective and from Shiloh PR, we don't have those allies.
Okay.
And I'm thinking it's because, like I said, obviously I came into public relations and maybe from a different angle from some people, and also because we've stuck to our niche. So I went to an event recently. I was listed on the PRWeek Power Book 2022. I didn't even know what it was. I'd never even heard of it. But anyway, I thought, oh, that sounds good,
Yeah.
So I went to the launch of the Power Book, and I met this lady, elderly white lady. We had a really lovely chat. We were just talking and talking. And then people kept coming up to her, and I'm thinking, okay. And then she explained what she did. She no longer works in the profession, but she's well known and well respected. And the way she introduced me to the people that kept coming up to her made me realize even more how important it is to have allies and contacts in this sector.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very
because
important.
She would say, so have you met Evadney? Evadney runs Shiloh PR. Evadney's blah. And you realize then it's her endorsement that they're taking on board. It's not whether I'm good or not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
a
bit like
that. I know for a fact, I don't know influential people. Therefore, to be able to build that has not been, and also I'm one of these people who maybe I don't even realize when people are trying to be allies. Maybe that's my problem. But I'm just like, and then you don't realize it actually it would have helped you if you
they were trying to help you out.
Yeah, but it is, you and I know in this industry, having the right, I call them champions, is invaluable.
Yeah.
But as Black people, it's harder for us because we don't have that. We don't have them.
Yeah.
Or they're few and far between.
Yeah.
So it's harder because they're fewer of those ones who are championing you.
Yeah.
And allowing you to be not to kind of. We were just talking about being your authentic self, but so whilst we recognize that in certain environment we will have to code switch. Mm-hmm. The reality is you still want somebody who knows that you can be you're true to your integrity.
Your integrity, yes.
So even when I'm in a certain environment, I still have core values that I won't change.
Yeah.
Irrespective of where I'm at. And you want somebody who respects that, but will give you that opportunity to just at least open doors for you, so you can go in there and do something with it.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think that's very important. And I think allies can come in that form where they are, making great connections for you. But you've also got allies who are probably singing your praises when you're not in the room as well. Yeah. So, I think those are.
And I'm sure we have that. And I'm very, very confident about that aspect because so far, Ebony, to be honest, in the 9 years nearly that this company has been going, all of the actual work that we have done have come from recommendations.
Well, that's brilliant.
I have not had to, every time I get an inquiry, it's because somebody has said speak to them.
which is what you want. Yes, exactly.
It's never been through me coldly trying to pitch to somebody. I write a lot of proposals, but those individuals have come to me in the first place.
Then you've got to give them
in that respect, So I think in that respect, we are very, very fortunate. And I'm also fortunate that I think certainly my experience with Black women, and I keep telling people over and over again, is how supportive a network of them I've had around me. So whatever people say about Black people not supporting and helping each other, that's not my experience.
That's not your experience.
My experience is that they are there. They are there to help you. And when things go, you can talk to somebody who understands where you're coming from.
Yeah. I think that's very important. So that's good that you have that network around you. I think that's super, super important. And that's interesting. So I suppose what I want to know also is what motivates you and what inspires you to keep going.
I love what I do. I love it. Much as some things, but then that's because I don't want to work full stop. I wish I had enough money not to have to work and I could do it voluntarily and I'd be quite happy. Just be rich and I could do it voluntarily. But anyway, so I think enjoying it really does motivate me. What inspires me is there are lots of people. I love people who are doing, and I aspire to be, I can see somebody who's really achieving. And for me, what it does is, it motivates me in that I realize I can't give up. I read a lot of motivational books. I read all the time and I listen all the time. And a lot of the time, they're always telling you, don't give up, because that time you give up, it could have been it the next. So true. And I keep that in my head. So every time I want to give up, it's like, but it might be all right. Tomorrow might be the day. So you can't give up.
Yeah.
So and I like working for our people. I really do. They frustrate me to the I don't know what, but I do love working with Black people. I do, and I so passionately want us to have the opportunities that we know can come, especially when you're small businesses and you and I can watch them and I know they can grow, and I know, but I know they won't grow without exposure.
They need
that keeps me going, because I genuinely want to see do that. I want to see succeed. I would love to see our community economically be a force to be reckoned with. And I really think PR helps enormously, even though people keep telling you about marketing. I really think PR does and can do an enormous amount of good towards giving our people that exposure and awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And with the way that things are digitally now, there's so many different ways for exposure. So, it's really cool. So on your journey so far, what would you say you found the most challenging?
Oh my goodness, that's always a difficult one for me. And the reason being, I don't dwell on it. So when somebody asks me, it's like, oh, I don't know. I can't think about.
The only thing that I thought about, well, not necessarily, but obviously it's for your challenge yourself, but I remember when we met ages ago, you were telling me about managing artists and difficulties of those. I found that really fascinating.
Do you know what? I'm going to say something that's going to surprise a lot of people. In terms of working with, and I've worked with tons and tons of, because initially we used to be an events PR company. So we did a lot of music events and stuff. Yeah. And actually I have found there's a couple of artists that I would rather not touch with a barge pole ever again.
Yeah.
But on the whole, when our company did the public relations for Oracle Gospel Festival, the very first major gospel event at Wembley.
Okay.
Those gospel artists were the hardest people to work with.
Oh, really? Amazingly surprising, actually. That is surprising.
Yes. I was shocked. Wow. I worked with some major dancehall artists and I didn't have that kind of problem with them.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's always the ones that you think are not like that and ones that are like that. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that was a challenge. Working on that with the artist was a challenge. I think the other challenge for me, and maybe it's my doing as opposed to anything external, age is a big factor.
Right.
And I think it could be, I'm conscious of my age. And in this industry, I'm conscious of what people think you are capable of doing. And therefore, I am very aware when of whether I'm maybe overcompensating when someone comes to us because I'm thinking, oh, they think you're old, and therefore, can you understand a younger demographics? Would you be able to promote them in the right way? So I think I'm probably my worst enemy when it comes to that, but it is a big challenge for me getting over the fact that I've come into the public relations arena at a much older age. And that's why the Women in PR's 45 over 45 list for me was a good thing, even though 45, I saw that a long time ago. but the reality, a long time ago. But at least they recognize that you still have a value after 45.
That was the whole point of it. That was the whole point of it. I remember when I was on the Women PR committee and we spoke about age as well, because we're like, we've got to do with this because, the industry is seen as such a young industry. And, women are getting older in the industry. You can't just write them off. We still have the same skills. And a lot of that, like you say, is getting over your own imposter syndrome. Just because, you're not, 20 something doesn't mean that you still don't have a clue about how certain apps work or whatever else or what's needed. So, no, I can understand that. But it's a challenge and I get it. But it's because of the industry. The industry is definitely kind of geared towards so-called younger people. But I see that changing, and I'm very glad that the women in PR did do the kind of, women over 45. And I thought that was a very good campaign to push. So I would have asked you, what you want from an employer, but you're not in-house, you're your own boss. So it's different. So I suppose what I would say to you, therefore, with your hat on from working as an in-house person, what would you say makes a good working environment? Because don't forget, for people listening to this podcast will also be employers. And we want to know that, help them to see how they can make it a better working environment for women of colour, for people of colour in general.
I think what I would hope is that people are judged on their actual work, and also rather than and I think employers need to constantly be examining themselves as to whether there are anything that they say or do or write, and look at those policies. Is there anything within them that may, negatively impact on someone, especially a woman of color? We deal, as women and women of color, this whole intersectionality affects us in so many ways.
Absolutely.
Because we will be impacted on by being a woman, and we'll be impacted on by being a woman of color. And there are other, depending on where you're at in that, you could be with the LGBTQ age, whether, so we're crossing a lot of the kind of potential for discrimination. So from an employer point of view, I think you need to listen to your staff, and you cannot, like we've said before, not everything can be proven by seeing something tangible. If someone says they feel they are being discriminated against, they feel that they're being treated unfairly, listen to them. Really and truly listen. Don't dismiss it just because it's never been said before by anyone, and you had somebody else before and they were a Black person and they've never complained. Well, they chose not to complain, or it didn't impact them in the same way. You have got to we've got to be serious about equality and this whole concept of being fair and equal and treating and it's not a one shoe fits all. And we're not a homogeneous group as Black people. Don't assume that because one person behaved or felt this way, the other person is going to do the same. And don't judge a negative behavior on the next person. Allow each person to be themselves. And I just, it's a constant grow. It doesn't stop. We have to always be looking at ourselves. And I'm as a Black person, we also sometimes have to really and truly be honest with ourselves as to how we are behaving in that work environment.
I think there's being honest with yourself in terms of how you show up, but also being honest with, for an employer's perspective, them being quite honest and open about what they're doing. Because if you've got check boxes, then that's not going to change the culture of the workplace. You know, you might, I use example quite a lot, like the whole, you know, H&M debacle with the monkey t-shirt and the black boy. Oh. Now, that was a huge, you know, debacle. And we know that, you know, people would always say, oh, well, maybe if there's a person of colour in the room, perhaps. But actually, it depends how empowered that person of colour is in the room. Because if that person is sitting in the corner, has always been told to read, just sit there and, you know, you look part of a diverse team, just sit and be pretty, then they won't really have, you know, the will to speak up. You know, are they empowered to speak up? And then you've got to also think about, you know, whilst you were happy to be, you know, doing things within the community, not every black person is going to want to do that. They might not want to work with the Brixton. They actually might want to work with Oxford. So again, you need to be open and understand that, you know, meet them where they are at. Do they want to work in that? Because I find that a lot of people have kind of get thrown into the DEI roles. And, you know, it's like, well, some of us care about it. Like, you know, I've got a passion about it, but not everybody wants to be labeled with that because they are the black person. So I feel like there's a lot of work to be done in the employer's point as well, in terms of making sure they're giving.
There's a great deal to be done. You know, you just threw something in that reminded me when I first started being a journalist at BBC in Bristol, they kept giving me all the jobs that was in St. Paul's. And if anybody knows, St. Paul's is the area where predominantly the black community live.
Right.
And everything. So eventually I thought, no, this is not on. Mm-hmm. So I had to say, whilst I don't mind going into St. Paul's and doing the black stories, quote unquote, I'm actually a journalist.
Yeah.
So I will do any story. Any
story.
Just as you expect my colleagues to do any story.
Exactly.
So I don't want you throwing me all of the black stories because I'm the one black reporter. That's not all. And also what people don't understand is our black community sees through it.
Yeah, they do.
Stupid.
They're not stupid. They'll see that. And that will drive them mad even more. So there's no point. You'll shut them down with that kind of behaviour. Especially if you send someone who is completely like a, you know, duck out of water into that area. Yeah. It will not go down very well.
No.
You know,
so I find so you're right. You're 100% right. Just because somebody looks a particular way doesn't mean they want to work always on the stories that will some of us want to do that because that's what we're interested in. But that's why I say we're not a homogeneous group. No. Don't treat us all the same. You have to work and treat that individual as that individual. Whatever is right for them is right for them.
Absolutely.
What's right for me isn't going to be right for another black person, as I've seen in the BBC time and time again. So
you'll see that exactly. And you'll see it in PR do. It's all over the place. So I want to touch on some of your proudest moments. So tell us about some of your proudest moments and some of your career highlights that you've had.
Wow. I got
you sound like you've had some great ones anyway from what you shared so far.
This is it, but I've kind of taken them all in my stride, so they never seem like anything at the time. It's only now when I can't have them, I'm thinking, gosh.
Yeah.
Obviously my children, but I think, you know what, my grandchildren are just, honestly, I never imagined I could feel the love I have for my grandchildren, because I thought when people used to go on and on about grandchildren, I used to think, oh, for God's sake, you know, and I thought my children was going to be it, but the grandchildren surpass everything. So they are it. Work-wise, I've been very, very fortunate, despite anything else negative that I might have said. I have worked abroad. I was to produce a program for the BBC regional programs in Ethiopia, covering Bob Marley's 60th birthday celebrations.
Oh, amazing.
That was incredible.
That would have been so fun to work on. I love that.
Yeah. And I now look back and think I didn't realize quite how lucky I was.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Brilliant.
But you know, that was it. That was a really memorable one for me. And I made some contacts that I've kept in touch with this, you know, all these years later.
Oh, that's amazing.
But, yeah, that was great.
No, that's good.
You know, it was a nice one. It was a nice one. So there's lots there's loads I could, but that one really sticks because of the whole recognition that I've gone all the way to Ethiopia.
It's amazing.
And as a Jamaican as well,
Mm-hmm.
I'd heard of, because I didn't know, you say you're of Jamaican heritage, so you'll have heard of this. I grew up with hearing Rastas saying they want to go to Shashamaniland, they want to go home. And I never, so to be able to visit there.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Actually go to Shashamani and meet some of the Rastas who'd made the transition from Jamaica or from the UK, because I met a family from Birmingham. We were doing, that for me was just...
But also been beautiful. Because you say, going to Ethiopia is like a rites of passage for Rastafarians. So, it's a big deal. So absolutely. Yeah. And to have that festival, the honouring Bob Marley there.
Yeah.
Very poignant. Very, very poignant. Very, very, that sounds great. Sounds great. Well, that's one I'm definitely jealous of. Well, definitely. That's a good one. So I suppose moving on slightly, is I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the industry and how you think it will evolve over the next few years. Obviously, we know there's a digital takeover. So being ready for that, to me, is major. And also we know that, there's been a push around the DEI and different things happening. So what do you think will happen to our industry over the next few years?
Well, I think over the next few years, your stats in terms of the makeup of the sector will have changed.
Yeah.
I am so heartened that when I go to networking and events now and see the number of young Black and brown and other ethnic minorities who are in this sector, who are now seeing public relations as a career opportunity. Whereas this, for a lot of people, especially people from my background, who wouldn't have seen public relations as an area to go into, that's becoming. Three of my students that I lecture in Luton are doing PR and marketing as their major.
Oh.
And so, and as I said, I do this other course for London, and that's public relations. So I'm seeing so much more diversity in ethnicity in particular, because in terms of gender, it's always been the sectors had lots of women. Where they go is another matter. Yeah. So that's not the issue. But in terms of ethnicity, I am heartened to see how it's changing. And I think if this keeps up, the face of PR will change. Completely. In terms of the digital, I'm of the vein. I'm probably one of the ones who look at it with a little bit more skepticism. And the reason I look at digital and how it takes over PR as in a bit skeptical is because I remember even 5 years ago when influencers were all the rage and everybody was talking about, well, you have to have influencers. It's becoming less and less important because people are beginning to say, I'm not so sure that I trust some of what influencers are saying anymore. Yeah. So that, and again, what I have found, and maybe it's because I also really stick to it, is that people are beginning to look back at traditional PR in terms of media relations, getting you a coverage in on a television or in radio or print. They're still valuing that. Yeah. They're still looking at that. They'll ask you, because social media almost feels to me in particular as it's just something you're going to have to do as part of your PR package. I used to hear people used to say, well, they don't need a PR professional because, well, I can do my own postings. They're now beginning to realize actually there's more to it than just you writing up a little
posting. Yeah, absolutely. There is more to it. And I think people get misconstrued about PR all the time. Like they just think it's, they think it's ad fab, some of people. And it's like, it's not exactly ad fab, okay? There's a lot more that goes into it.
Exactly. And I think they're beginning to, those that are serious are beginning to understand that and recognize that people like you or I bring a value that they can't do themselves.
Yeah.
So I think whilst what we're going to be doing will change, because I think we're having to be a little bit more knowledgeable about lots of different ways of giving our clients that exposure that they're after and how we craft our stories, that it's interest, that it goes further. what we offer, and for me, like I said, it's a constant learning. I'm constantly having to keep, so much so that you feel, oh, for goodness sake, I'm tired of this now. Somebody tells you there's a new platform.
There's a new this, a new that. You're like, another one. I know, it's another one. But again, but it's like with everything now, isn't it? It's about working out what works for your clients, because not all platforms are for everybody, I think. It just depends on what you're doing, what the messaging is, and who you're trying to go for. But again, it just creates more layers. But it is layers of more learning for us as well. So no, I get it.
It's more learning, and it's also you're not only for yourself, but you're having to, I think, manage your clients' expectations and always teach your clients much more now, because they're coming to you thinking that, oh, well, I need to be on TikTok. Why? What is it? Yeah. Who are you trying to reach?
Yeah.
And you have to now start. It's not, you have to, for me anyway, I'm trying to say, it's not that I don't want to do these things, but I'm trying to tell you, do you really need them? Yeah. Are you going to hit your target through this medium?
Yeah, exactly. It's
and
about,
that's what they need.
That's what they need to know. Yeah, you need to manage. And it is, again, about managing expectations. It always is. Your clients and where they think they should be. And it's a case of, well, actually, you could go there, but then you'd be speaking to nobody. None of your audience are there. Okay. Your audience over here is where you need to be. So yeah, I completely get it. I get it. It's interesting.
Absolutely.
It's interesting.
Absolutely. And because I work with the Black community, makes it even harder. I'm telling you, they are hard work, because they come thinking they know it all, and really they're not quite sure why they're paying you.
Yeah, so. They're thinking, hold on a minute, I could do this myself or whatever. You're thinking, well, hold on, we have skills here. Okay, we're not just posting up things on Facebook. There's a method to our stuff and what we're doing. So it's interesting. So I'm coming up to my wrapping up times, but I wanted to ask you about your sort of any sort of lessons that you've learned throughout your career, and what kind of advice you would give to young people of colour in particular that are considering entering the industry.
When I talk to the young people that I speak to now, I say to them that in public relations in particular, because it's one of those sectors that people have heard of but don't really know what it is. So I think that, and one of the things I say is, you've got to like people. I don't think you can do this job really well if you're not a people person, if you don't want to have anything to do with people. Because I think you and I know, if somebody comes to you saying they want you to work on a project, a lot of the times, a lot of your time have to be spent getting to know them, because actually you're the one best placed to know how to put that story in the way that it's going to be attractive to the media. So I have to like people. I have to want to spend time and get to know you and spend time with you. So I'd say, to anyone coming in, you want to know that you like people. You have to have this thing about people, that you enjoy working with people. And that, for me, contacts, I think, is invaluable, absolutely invaluable, not just media contacts, but those connections that we were saying
in the industry.
So that you can, in the industry, you need to have those connections, because otherwise it's very hard work. It's not that it's not achievable, but actually if you have connections that will help you, you will get through much quicker. One of the things I say to, and that's not just people in PR, but I say to young journalists, everyone you meet is a potential contact. Don't dismiss anyone, no matter who they are.
It's very true.
Because as a journalist, you are often looking for case studies. And that person you were talking to when you were walking the other day on the train that you thought didn't matter, actually could be that case study that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Or in the future, or later on, down the line. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I and also the other thing from a PR perspective, what I say to young people when it comes to connections, if you meet someone who says, keep in touch, here's my card, call me, here's linking with me, do it, because you do. And integrity for me, and I just been told this week by someone which I hadn't thought about when I said there's certain things I felt uncomfortable with. He said, you're uncomfortable with it because it is against your core. It's against what you believe in. And that's why you're finding it uncomfortable. So I think you need to be really, really, I don't take a job just for the money. No. If I don't think I can add value. I will tell that client, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be the best person for you. Yeah. And if I can help, I will help. I did that this week. Somebody messaged me about a job. And when we had a long chat, and the more, because from the reading of what she'd asked, I didn't think I was right, but let me talk it through. And I said to her, no, I don't think I'm the right person. But what I'll do, I will contact some people who I think might be better for you. And you can then talk to them. Yeah. And you know what she said? Thank you so much. And I am working on something else that I know I'm going to need PR for. And I'll come to you when
well, there you go.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Be honest.
I think that's very important. Having integrity, talking to people and building contacts. Very, very key. And then to round it up, mindset. I always like to touch on mindset in terms of, how we deal with our internal mindset, our war. We have our own mindset war going on, and self-limiting beliefs. There's a lot of, imposter syndrome going on and things like that. So
absolutely,
how do you deal with that? Do you have any tips?
I think it's motivation. And as I've said to you, I'm a real big fan of, I read a lot of motivational books, inspirational books, and I listen before I go to sleep. That's what I put on. I put on some inspiration. So whether it be that I want something to help me to deal with success or to help me to deal with confidence, you search for it. And that's what I listen to.
Yeah.
And I listen to that a lot. And I learn from people every day. I really do. So to keep me going, because as much as I know I've done a lot, and when one of my students came to me one week and he said, I've been Googling you, and I suddenly thought, oh dear God. and he said, gosh, you've done so much. And then I have to get to say to myself, I'm learning to say thank you and internalize it, rather than trying to say, no, which we do.
We do that. We try to play it down. I don't know why. We
are so bad at playing everything down. Don't tell anybody. Don't. And I don't know whether culturally we're told it's showing off, so we keep it down.
Yeah.
But you need to, because it's part of that boosting yourself that will enable you to present yourself when you're looking for those jobs that you want, and when you want to go for your value. Because I spent years doing, even when we launched the company, people come to you and say, oh, but I don't have much money. And you think, oh, okay. Because you actually don't think you're worth what you're asking.
Yeah, that's so true.
Get to the point, and whatever it takes to work on yourself, that you're able to stick to your work. You know what your worth is. It's not what somebody else is. Somebody might charge 10 times as much as you, but as long as inside you're happy and comfortable that you are getting the value that you think you deserve, then that's what matters. And work on that, because I'm telling you, I think young people are better at it than we are. I honestly think they seem to be so confident. I admire them. I'm looking up to them. So I talk to these young people and they're saying they've done this and they're that, and they're demanding. They're like, oh my God.
Yeah, and it's so true. It's so true. Our younger ones are definitely a bit more, they're definitely a bit more gung-ho, these ones. But I don't blame them. But that's the whole thing, isn't it? The next generation, you want them to be an extra more and a bit more and a bit more. So
absolutely.
It's good. But you touched on the great point. Know your worth. And that's so important. And I had this conversation quite a few times with people and women that I know in the industry, and we've had different issues. And I always say, know your worth. And I think that's so important. And again, you have to kind of remind yourself and teach yourself over and over and over. Because I remember doing a talk on this. I think it was one of the government gateways or something like that. I've done a talk at one of their events, and I spoke about women and the imposter syndrome, and I used some really good stats, and it was really interesting because it was like men would go for jobs that they were not even qualified for, and they would still go for it. Whereas women would be overqualified for a job and still wouldn't be going. They would find one thing and be like, oh, I don't meet that criteria, so I won't go for that.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, well, no, put yourself forward, because more than likely you might find that that little criteria is not as important and you can get that skill while you're there. Like, let's not freeze ourselves out, and we do that quite a lot. So no,
I talk to my daughter about that all the time, because she goes through his job description. But I'm sure I can't do. I said, but if you went for a job that you could do 100% of, you would be bored in 5 minutes.
True.
So you need to go for a job that's going to challenge you, and because that's the whole point. So you're part of what you're looking at is skills that you're going to learn. So don't write yourself up, because I said a man thinks he can do 2 things. He's telling them he can do it all.
Exactly.
So
exactly. But it's the way we've been taught, though. It's also the way we've been taught and bred, and the whole experience we have as women growing up, and then we feel like we have to put ourselves on the back burner, and it's like, no, actually, let's switch that around.
Definitely a woman thing. Just like we won't negotiate a higher wage. We're just grateful that they've given us what we've asked for, and we're just like, oh my gosh, am I worth it? A man is like, no, I don't want that. You've got to put, and he will get what he asks for.
What he wants.
We've got, women.
Very true.
But these, like I said, these young people, I admire them, because every time I'm at a meeting and I'm sitting there chatting to them and they're telling me, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh dear, I wish I had your confidence when I was your age, because this is incredible. It
is amazing. They do some amazing things out here, definitely. So looking back on your journey, would you do it all over again?
Yes, I would. I probably would do the PR bit earlier.
Why not?
I think I would definitely have set up my own business earlier. Because I do love the freedom it gives me.
Yeah.
The fact that you are responsible for your what you do.
Outcomes. Yeah, absolutely.
I love that flexibility and the freedom, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was still in my 9 to 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I control my diary. I can work till late in the evening and then do what I want to do in the morning, because I've got things to do personally, and then I will carry on working in the evening.
Exactly.
So I love that. I really do love the freedom. And I've also learned that I don't need as much money to live on as I thought I did, which is surprising, because I thought but I'm happy, and that's the key. Honestly,
that is the key. As long as you're happy, I think that's super important. And I will always say, put your happiness first.
Absolutely.
Very important.
Absolutely.
Because you can be in a high paying job and be miserable.
Precisely.
So, you want to be happy with what you're doing, and feel like you're valued and appreciated. So that's brilliant. So, all right, we're going to wrap it up, and I've got like 2 last questions, which was what's the best and the worst advice you've been given? Because I always think this is funny sometimes. Not everyone has bad advice. A lot of people have good advice.
No, I'm just going to say I can't remember anybody giving me bad advice. I think good advice, I don't know. I don't even know if I can think of anyone, because I'm so self-sufficient. I generally just do. I think about things for a long time before I make a decision. I'm not one of these who just make decisions because my thing is that if I say I'm going to do something, then I have to do it. So I don't make the decision lightly.
Right.
But also, so one of my traits, I would say to people, I have a trait that is good and bad, in that I never give up. But sometimes I should know when I'm flogging a dead horse and give up. But I'm really, so it is that trait, that tenacity that's good, and keep going. But sometimes you have to understand that you should have stopped long time
I'm a bit like that, actually. I do keep going. Sometimes you're like, you keep going, but then you have to pull yourself back and be like, hold on a minute.
Yeah, should have stopped long time ago.
Let's just leave that there,
And in things that, in terms of bad advice, I never think of anyone giving me a bad advice. Like when I first decided to set up and people questioned me leaving the BBC, I think it was because they actually had my best interests at heart.
Oh, yeah.
I think, they might have, when people were saying, oh, what, you're going to give up your good job to go and do this? And what if you don't make any money? And what if it fails? And I remember working out before I left the BBC, I said, okay, if the company doesn't work and it fails, what's the worst case scenario? And the worst case scenario was that I couldn't find a job. And I didn't believe that I couldn't find a job. I would find a job somewhere doing something. Mm-hmm. And if I didn't find a job, well, I would sell my house and go to Jamaica and sit on my mom's veranda. Well,
you had some not bad plan A and B, is it? I mean,
that's what I used to say to people. I said, if the worst thing is I sell my house and go and sit on my mom's veranda in Jamaica, well, if that's the worst case scenario, that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And I think that most of that is fear, isn't it? People fear. That's like when I left my full-time job and I was doing my own, everyone was like, wow, everybody, oh my gosh, are you sure? And good luck. And oh, wow. You know what I mean? It's just like, because everyone's scared because they're so used to the comfort of having that paycheck. Absolutely. And, but I like the idea of working for myself, and I've been doing it, similarly to you. I was like 2013. Yeah.
Wow.
So again, I've worked with different clients and I've enjoyed it, so I feel like it's also been a growth period for me as well. Absolutely. And I've found other things that I've been interested in, and so like podcasting, for example.
Absolutely.
Love it. So again, it does open you up, and I feel like life does begin, as they say, outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you're 9 to 5, sometimes you're in your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And again, even you can be in 9 to 5 and maybe in middle management and you want to move up again because you're in your comfort zone. So you just got to keep pushing and pushing forward. So I think that's really good. I think that's good. And would you say
think of any bad advice?
No bad advice.
I can't think of that at all. Not
that no. Well, that's good. Well, that's always a good thing, isn't it?
And after this is over, I'm going to have some.
You're going to think to yourself, I should have said that. Well, my last question for you is whether you have any rules that you've implemented to help you along your career journey. Like I gave a couple of examples to the last person I interviewed, which was whenever I used to go for interviews, I used to love going for interviews because everyone thinks I'm weird, but I'm like, I love it because I will interview that person. That's what I'm looking at it. Like the company that I'm going to, you're interviewing me, but I'm interviewing you. Do I want to work for you? Do I feel like I will get value here? And I would always have a set of questions that would always throw them, and they'd be like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that." And, but I thought it was very important for me in my career.
Very important. And I always say you should do that. But I've just never been confident enough to do that. I think I probably would now.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't. And they do say you should, because it is a two-way street.
It's a two-way street, and I've always looked at it that way. And I've turned down jobs based on that because I felt like, well, I wouldn't fit there. And I could see the environment, and you ask about the culture, they don't know what to say, and you think, well, this doesn't sound good, so like, I'd always ask questions, but I'd always say also is, if you're in an organization and you've got a career plan where you want to move up the ladder, if you can't get promoted within, go outside and get promoted. That was also a motto that I lived by too, because I just thought, I'm not going to be stuck here. I want to make sure that I can keep moving and moving where I feel, so those are a few of my rules that I had.
I think if I have any rules at all, and I've had to exercise it a couple of times, is if I think someone's questioned my integrity to a degree that I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I pride myself on, and that's because I've told myself that if you can't kill me, the worst you can do to me is kill me. Yeah. So I'm going to be honest with you. And if you question my honesty and my integrity, then we don't have anywhere to go.
Anything else left?
There's no further I can go with you, and I'm not going to. I'm not willing to.
Yeah.
So I think that's a rule I do live by, and even more so since I've been working for myself. I've let clients go numerous times, even ones that I'd started contracts with, because they then started questioning. They started saying they felt that you weren't delivering what you were supposed to do, and they don't understand why. So I just say, okay, let's call it.
Yeah, I think again, integrity. It comes down to that, doesn't it? Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah. I've had to say that, have the same sort of approach too.
Yeah, and I think so. If I have any rules, it's usually that and I also feel that. So I'm always going to be honest, because I say, well, you're not going to kill me. You can't kill me. So this is the worst you can do to me. So what am I lying to you for? What's the point?
Absolutely.
So so honesty and integrity are my two things. And if you make me think you're questioning that and make me feel that that's something that you're questioning, and I'm not going to be able to change your views, then we don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah.
And I won't work with you, and that's fine. Yeah. That's okay. I won't fall out with you, because one thing I don't do, I don't hold malice. I don't, because I think if I'm holding it against you, I'm poisoning me.
Yeah,
I really
exactly.
believe that. So why am I letting you stay in my head and make me?
I know, rent free. Why should you be in my house, rent free, my head and my heart? No, I get it.
No.
Yeah, I get it. There's no point.
So, there's no point.
I agree with
think
that.
Those are the rules I have. I don't really, apart from that, I get on with everybody. I always believe in treating people the way, if you tell me that, I worked with that person and they were horrible, all that makes me do is be a little bit more cautious, but it ain't going to make me treat them no differently until they give me a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
When they give me a reason.
Exactly.
So you treat people as you find them. And that's the end of that. I've always been like that. Because I think we all have different personalities.
We do.
And just because I don't get on with somebody doesn't mean you won't.
You won't. Exactly.
So I'm not going to let that be your experience affect mine. So I think it's always been that I've gone into jobs with an open mind and take it as I find it.
Well, thank you so much, Evadney, for coming on and sharing your experiences with us. Been having a lovely time speaking with you. I can speak to you forever. It's so nice. So thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I will be sharing you the links with you. But guys, thank you for tuning into the podcast. Okay, you can check out Evadney Campbell on LinkedIn. She runs Shiloh PR. You can link in with her there, get some advice, and, connect. I think we talked about connecting, haven't we? So again, a big thank you to you. I will be back with a new series soon, so stay tuned. Thank you, guys.